Good. So thank you everyone for joining today. It is genuinely an absolute privilege to be here talking with you. I can't wait to hear from our speakers later, and I can't wait to hear from you in the Q&A at the end of the session. So the session today is on leveraging new digital technologies for conservation impact. This is what today is going to look like. We're going to have a bit of an introduction from myself. I am Sasha Seabright. I'm the project manager of the Digital Disruption and Future of Conservation initiative at Unearthodox. I'm just going to do a little bit of an intro on what the project's all about and what we mean when we say digital disruption. We will then hear from three wonderful speakers, Jorn Dallinga, Fiona Corwin-Pulowski, and Jeremy Epstein, on their projects operating within the Web3 and AI for conservation space. We will then have a Q&A, and please do put your questions in the chat as we go. We've got an amazing team backstage who will be collating all those questions, and hopefully we won't miss anyone, and we would really like to get around as many of those questions as possible. So please do just put them in the chat as we go through today. So what is the objective of this session? So this session, we hope to ignite conversations, and we hope to explore how initiatives utilizing digitally disruptive technologies for conservation impact moved from idea to implementation. I will talk a bit more about that aspect of idea to implementation as we go through this session. But firstly, I just want to touch on what is digital disruption. There's many linked terms. We've got digitization, digital transformation. But when we talk about digital disruption as a project and as a team, we're talking about the technology-driven radical changes, and that radical part is really key, the radical changes to business models, forms of value creation, and ways of working. We're talking about technology-driven changes that shift the status quo and may make previous practices obsolete. And a really key example of that, a very common and well-accepted example, is of smartphones. Smartphones replaced landlines, portable cameras, GPS devices, MP3 players, and combined them all into a single device. Obviously, digital disruption by that nature then is incredibly broad. It's any kind of disruption caused by digital technologies. So we had to narrow down our focus as a project. And we looked at digital communities and Web3 applications in particular. But before I want to go any further, I'd like to just do a quick poll to get an idea of a sense check in the room of what you understand by Web3 applications, what your level of understanding is before we go through the rest of this session. So we're just going to launch a poll now. Bear with me if it just takes a moment to go live. Sorry, digital disruption in action, everyone. Let me just check something. If there's having trouble with the poll, we can come back to it. It's all right. Thanks, Rosie. Apparently the poll won't launch. There we go. So as a kind of general idea, for those that maybe don't know what Web3 applications are, oh, we've skipped a slide. Sorry. For those that don't know what Web3 is so much, if you think of Web 1 as the original internet. So Web 1 is a space where we could only consume content, not create the content. Web 2, the internet that we are most accustomed to now, is a space where we can create content and create the communities, but the power and experiences are still very much centralized within big organizations such as Google, Facebook, Amazon. And Web3 is the next iteration of the internet as we currently see it. This focuses very strongly on the decentralization of power and enabling people to own their own data on the internet. It can also be seen as an ecosystem of experiences, which is where aspects like virtual worlds might also come into play within that Web3 ecosystem. So within our project, we focus on digital communities and Web3 applications. By Web3 applications, we're talking blockchain, AI, the metaverse, things like that. So we really see these two things as two aspects of the same coin. So the communities are enabling these rapid developments within the Web3 sphere. And the Web3 applications themselves are enabling new forms of community to develop. So, for example, anyone that knows about decentralized autonomous organizations, that's a new form of governance structure and a new form of community. So we were very much interested in how these new communities and these Web3 applications could help, or not just could help, could impact transparency, fundraising, democratization, engagement, and inclusivity within the conservation sector. And I removed the word help there because that impact could be positive and negative. We do want to look at the whole picture. So how can these aspects impact these things within the conservation sector? But why do we need to look at digital disruption as a vector for change? So this is where we take a bit of a step back and look at what is the need for change. So the Future of Conservation NGOs initiative is another initiative within Unearthodox, and they identified 4 broad themes where change is most needed within conservation organizations. These were operational and funding models, communication and narratives, interdependence and inclusivity, and power and legacy. Now, for anyone operating within the conservation space or aware of conservation activities, these may not come as much of a surprise. But what did come as more of a surprise was with these projects operating in tandem, we saw how the digital communities and the Web3 tools that were being rapidly developed were already and could potentially even more so impact in the future every aspect of this model that we see here. So it was a real eye-opener to the need to remain aware of what is going on in this digital disruption space, because it will almost inevitably impact these 4 key themes for change. Actually, at this point, I do want to recognize the fact that this session will be showcasing examples based within the so-called global north. And that was the Web3 for Impact community that we as a project did engage with the most. We have seen evidence of incredibly vibrant communities elsewhere in the world who are driving huge change in the Web3 for Impact space, particularly regarding financial inclusivity, redistribution of power, and aspects of that nature. We very much would like to keep getting involved within this space. So if anyone has examples of Web3 and AI initiatives for conservation impact that are operating from the so-called global south, then please do let us know in the chat or get in touch with us afterwards. We will actually be talking about inclusivity, especially as it pertains to Web3 and conservation in next week's session in detail. So what was the journey that we went on as a project that brought us to this session here today? So the project began in 2021, and we were complete novices in this Web3 space. I didn't know what an NFT was, had no idea what blockchain was. It was a completely new, quite overwhelming, but exciting world to look into. So we really wanted to just deep dive in there, do the researching, questioning, and networking piece, really getting to know people that were already operating in this space, and also getting to know the conservationists that were struggling to operate in this space and didn't necessarily have the resources or knowledge to know how to engage with these new technologies and communities. It was at the end of December 2022 that we started to disseminate this knowledge. So the project presented at COP15, which was a really wonderful privilege to be there. And the first iteration of the digital toolkit was released. I will be talking about the second iteration of the digital toolkit shortly. And the objectives of this project this year, based on the research that we did in 2022, was we wanted to help build capacity and inspire the conservation sector about the existing and emerging technologies that are out there currently. We also wanted to look outwards at the systemic impact of these technologies on and for the conservation sector. And we wanted to look inwards about how the conservation organizations can incorporate and remain aware of these rapidly developing digital tools and communities. And I think it's really important to say here that they are so rapidly developing that it does take resources that often the conservation sector may not have to stay aware of these aspects. So how can they do that in a way that is feasible? And what positionality can and should conservation organizations take in this increasingly digital landscape? So this is where I come to the resource that we did create as a team, which we're obviously incredibly proud of, and it's the Digital Disruption for Conservation Toolkit. So this toolkit was a culmination of many, many nights of going down rabbit hole after rabbit hole in the Web3 for conservation space. And all of that knowledge we put into this toolkit because the knowledge that was out there was very scattered and often not directly related to conservation impact. So we really wanted to create a resource that was tailor-made for conservation. It's a free resource, so please do check it out. I believe it will be linked in the chat shortly. The toolkit contains 8 chapters at the moment. You can see them in front of you here. blockchain, smart contracts, crypto, NFTs, DAOs, virtual worlds, artificial intelligence, and very importantly, putting those pieces together. A lot of initiatives that are out there and will potentially be out there looking to create impact in the conservation space will be combining one or more of these tools together to create that solution. I do want to also to point out here that we've got different sections within the chapters, and each one has the down to basics, the existing use cases, the potential use cases, and the key considerations. And the key considerations part I find really interesting, because we're not pretending that these things are silver bullets. We're not trying to say that every conservation organization should shoehorn in these technologies into their efforts, but they can potentially be of use to some of our conservation problems that we are experiencing and will continue to experience in the future. And it's important to remain aware of what's going on. And it's also important to remain aware of these key considerations if you do want to get involved with using these tools for conservation impact. So as I said, we were incredibly proud to create this resource, but we also recognized that this was a first step, the theory step. And that when we were talking to conservation practitioners, we saw and heard the need to showcase initiatives that were already working in this interdisciplinary space to support others wondering how to get from theory and ideas to implementation. So what are the challenges they faced? How did they overcome those challenges? What would they do differently if they could go back in time? And how did they get the buy-in, the knowledge, the team that they needed to make their idea a reality? And that leads me very excitingly to our first speaker today. So Jorn Dallinga has a background in tropical forestry and a master's in geoinformation science. He started his career as a research assistant, after which he moved into the Worldwide Fund for Nature. Jorn has been working for WWF Netherlands for almost 7 years. And over the last 3.5 years, he's been working on data-driven conservation and innovation projects within WWF. He focuses on exploring digital disruption solutions for complex conservation challenges, working with technical partners. And this led to the creation of the program that Jorn will be talking about today, Forest Foresight, where deforestation is predicted in order to tackle illegal deforestation. So thank you so much for being here, Jorn. I'm going to pass over to you now.
Thanks a lot, Sasha. Thanks for the kind introduction. Very excited to be here. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to talk today in the next 10 to 15 minutes about, indeed, Forest Foresight, a predictive warning system to prevent deforestation. And the exciting part of this program is that we went on a journey for about 4 to 5 years to the point where we are today. And my background, before I kick off with a few exciting slides, we worked in the past also. I mean, these are the things that you guys recognize, right? So using drones, technology, phone applications in the field to collect data. These are, I think, the more recognizable solutions that are out there currently when it comes to tech. And that's what I've been working on for the last, well, let's say 7, 8 years or so. And we've been working a lot on scoping innovations. What are that digital disruptions that are happening? I'm also working on scenario building in nature-based solutions in Zambia, for example. And I think the more exciting part that I will dive in today is that predictive solution using artificial intelligence. But just to give you a hint of the background. So where am I working? The Worldwide Fund for Nature. I believe most of you should recognize that, or hopefully would recognize that, with a mission to stop the degradation of the Earth's natural environment and to build a future in which humans live in harmony with nature. The deforestation challenge. You cannot open the news and find out that deforestation is rampant across the world, but specifically the tropics. Just to highlight the severe intensity of deforestation and its challenge, currently on the slide, just to showcase its impact. The size of Portugal deforested each year, lots of carbon emitted associated with that, and disrupting livelihood of local communities and indigenous people. This is the challenge that we saw, that we wanted to see if we could intervene with an AI solution on this space. And what we developed for the case for change was, can we have earlier interventions to bring the conservation space on forest to the next level? And from left to right, if you follow me on this chain, how currently deforestation occurs in a particular landscape. So in this example is Borneo in Indonesia and Malaysia, is that pristine forests exist and signals of road and canal development starts to occur, allowing to create a sort of accessibility for illegal logging, so people can access the forest. It starts to degrade, losing its value, and then large-scale land clearing and land conversion starts to occur. And some of these indicators to date can be picked up by satellite and remote sensing technology. So you have these early warning systems that detect forest loss, but then the damage has been done, right? The deforestation has occurred. So what we wanted to bring to the table is that case for change. Can we intervene earlier if we know where that next deforestation event is going to happen? And when is that an actionable alert, right? When can we make that an actionable prediction? So that's the case for change that we wanted to bring to the table. And thus we developed a sort of pipeline of how the tech works for Forest Foresight. I'm going to walk you through that briefly. So from left to right, how it currently works is that we collect historic data sets, mainly radar data sets. So that's a relatively new technology in the last 2 to 3 years, where now some sensors from satellites are able to penetrate cloud cover, allowing for systematic and cloud-free observations of where forest loss is occurring on a near real-time observation, so every 6 to 12 days. We combine that data set with step 2, with a lot of other open, accessible, and public accessible data sets. Think of elevation data, think of the location of palm oil mills, think of land cover, land maps, road networks, and although that data set is thrown into a machine learning model at step 3. And that machine learning model trains itself based on that historic satellite data on where forest loss has occurred in the past, and what the linkages were with some of these other data sets that we're exploring, that we have been using. So, for example, a road going towards a forested area is most likely going to experience or has a higher risk of deforestation. And even more so if it's in a very populous area, or if, for example, palm oil mills are at a close location. And it then spits out these predictions, right? So the forest at risk 6 months ahead of time. So in 6 months at these locations, we can say with an 80% accuracy where deforestation is going to happen at that place. And step 5, and that's the most tricky one, we also work with our stakeholders in these landscapes to think of what kind of interventions could one do to actually prevent deforestation at these places. And these consist of community engagement, safeguards in enforcement protocols, and preventative warning measures. And I can highlight a few throughout the presentation. So how does it actually look like? So imagine yourself being a forest area manager, and you will have your scarce resources to, for example, protect your national park or your forest management area. And on the left side, you can see some of these predictions on the maps, right? So the left side is sort of the status quo. Imagine yourself looking at the map and thinking, all right, I see some deforestation happening, but where the coming 6 months should I go next to intervene on time and to prevent most deforestation? And that's where the added value of Forest Foresight comes in. So it helps you illustrate if you would go to these locations, you can prevent most deforestation. And on the right side, you see 6 months later, so the actual deforestation occurring if you would not intervene, right? So these are predictions picked that no intervention was based on. And you can see that the intensity of some of these predictions occurred 6 months later. And even some of these predictions had more severe deforestation than others. And we also help illustrate this, the intensity we expect with some of our predictions. So how did we come about this, right? The more interesting part also of this work is that we actually explored the use case of AI for some of the conservation challenges. So on this slide, just to see what we went through with one of our partners. So we did this with the Boston Consulting Group. And what we wanted to discuss is we're often too late, right, at the table to prevent human-induced biodiversity loss. So what could we do when creating a predictive engine? Can we actually forecast and prevent earlier sort of some of these disasters from happening? And we had 3 use cases we wanted to explore. And remind you, this is 4 to 5 years ago. And we have 3 use cases that we found very interesting. So the deforestation risk that we actually now matured and moved into Forest Foresight. But we had 2 more use cases, right? The human-wildlife conflict and the obstruction in rivers. And what we then did is proceed in sort of checking what are the criteria for a viability idea. So how do we screen some of these ideas to actually mature into the next phase of worthwhile investment for prototyping and for piloting and to create a minimal viable product? So just to show you a few of them, for example, is there value and impact? Is there an actual value to intervene on time to try and determine if we can intervene earlier on time to prevent that from happening, a disaster? What is the data feasibility, right? Is the criteria, is there data even available to start predicting or to start forecasting this specific challenge? And this is a very important one, the last one, the engagement of teams, right? So from a conservation organization perspective, you have to consider also sometimes the marketability of a program, right? So can we get the funds in for this specific solution to that challenge? Can we sell it internally? Can we actually have teams on the ground work with us for this solution? So all these checkboxes have been done, and there's quite an assessment behind this to help us establish what are the most feasible ideas that we want to move into the next phase. So that became Forest Foresight, and it has quite a few phases that we walk through in each country. So we kick off with the preparation phase. Then you have the pilot phase and the scaling phase, which should naturally merge into the live phase. So the idea here is that each country has a sort of stage gate criteria check, right? So once you commit yourself to the preparation phase, after those 4 to 6 months, you check again. All right, are we on track? Did we achieve what we wanted to achieve? And is it worthwhile from an investment point of view to move into the pilot phase? So even though we did have a proof of concept, we built a prototype, and we tested the minimal viable product, in each country, we still walk through these phases individually to ensure that we also have the enabling conditions in each country when it comes to governmental buy-in, for example, or political unrest, that we are checking the right boxes every time. Now, obviously, there are some challenges that we went through along the way, and I won't go in depth through all of them, although I'm very interested if some of you would like to, then I'm happy to have some separate discussions on that. But just to highlight the guiding principles on the bottom right. For this program, we follow a set of guiding principles that we want to follow, and one of them is also community safeguarding, because you can imagine us working primarily with governments on embedding this solution within their institutional frameworks, that they can intervene on deforestation when it's unwanted or when it's illegal. That, for example, communities or indigenous people living or having the livelihood dependent on the forest might be interfered. And it's very important for us that is done appropriately. So, for example, we also built in the safeguard element on protocol. So if, for example, in Gabon, where we're piloting and scaling Forest Foresight, we ensure that governmental enforcement actions have been updating their protocols on how to act on Forest Foresight when engaging communities or when engaging indigenous people. Because you can also imagine that WF can't be everywhere, and we are not in mandated organizations to act on illegal deforestation in these countries. So where are we right now with the program? Since a couple of years, so we are active in Gabon, we're active in Kalimantan, Indonesia, and Sarawak in Malaysia, and we're going to kickstart the program in Laos, Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia as next steps, with the ultimate aim to contribute to reducing illegal deforestation across these tropical areas and tropical forests. And just to highlight the mission and the ambition. So in that sense, we can't commit to showcasing impact that we actually reduced illegal deforestation, because that's a bit above our accountability ceiling. What we, however, can commit to, or what our ambition is, that we want to see Forest Foresight adopted by multiple landscapes in these 12 countries across these deforestation fronts at least by the end of 2030, but we aim for 2027. And that brings me a bit to where we are right now with Forest Foresight. And I just want to share with the last two slides my feelings on where we're going to move in the space of digital disruption and the conservation technology. And there was a very nice assessment done by, in the paper you can find online, The State of Conservation Technology by Wild Labs. And what they did was identify what our current technology is doing on the left side in terms of how often are these applied, right? So the left side is what is the current overall performance of some of these buckets of technologies currently being used. And on the right side, you see where are some of the untapped potential. So where's sort of the next step in some of these sort of advancements needed, or where can we find sort of the most next opportunities when it comes to using these technologies in this digital disruptive space. And you can see that the machine learning and the AI and the computer vision aspect seems to be one of the top ones that might have the novelty aspect to it. So that's going to be, for me, a very interesting space to keep track of how that's going to change the conservation space. And also just to show you, this is also from the Wildlife Survey. Also, you can find that online. Just some recent developments, opportunities, and ongoing challenges. And I think these are interesting to be aware of when developing solutions. And just to highlight some of the opportunities, there's a vast amount of projects, institutes, universities working on open source software, right? Open data repositories, and a specific amount of collaboration happening amongst these institutes. There's an increasing amount of analytical tools, cloud computing, becoming available from the tip of our hands in the last decade or so, but specifically the last couple of years. And quite an advancement in the number of fit-for-purpose technologies, which are really relevant for solving sort of complex, but that require a fit-for-purpose technology to that specific solution. Let me just thank you here and then hand over back to you, Sasha.
Thank you so much, Jorn. Thank you so much for that super fascinating chat. And if anyone has any questions for Jorn, I can see that some people are already putting questions in the chat. Please keep them coming. We will get around as many as we can at the end of the talks. So next up, we are going to have a talk from Fiona Corwin-Pawlowski. So Fiona is Chief Strategy Officer at Project SETI, a non-profit organisation on a mission to listen to and translate the communication of whales. With over 20 years of experience building programmes and partnerships within the social impact space, Fiona is a specialist in structure and strategy for new organisations and initiatives. She is committed to storytelling as a tool for social change, and in 2011, she co-founded Project Histoire, a non-profit that produced photography and youth development workshops across Haiti. Originally from Michigan, Fiona is based in New York City, and we are very happy to have her here today. So over to you, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Sasha, and hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited to be talking to you about Project SETI today, and Jorn, really enjoyed your presentation and excited to take you all from the land to the ocean now. And so thank you for the background, Sasha. Just to say further, just a little of my connections to the conservation space. Prior to coming to Project SETI last year, I had worked for 6 years at Rihanna's Clara Lionel Foundation, which worked across the Caribbean on climate justice and climate resilience. And that led me to the amazing island of Dallinga, where our research at Project SETI takes place, and the rest is history. So I just wanted to point out this photo of the sperm whale, which are the whales that we study at Project SETI, was taken by the amazing Amanda Cotton. And before I tell you a little about the organization, I just wanted to give you all a glimpse into the magic of how these creatures sound. And I'm going to play this video. It's going to be black at first, and then the imagery will fade in.
I don't think we can hear it, Fiona. That may be a tech issue.
Oh, no. 1 second. How about now? No?
No, the magic is evading us. Sorry
Oh my
about
gosh. Okay, well, we can try to come back to that later. Can you all hear me okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, amazing. Well, sorry about that. Another technology disruptor, as Sasha mentioned earlier. So skipping ahead to telling you a little about Project SETI, we are a nonprofit organization based in the United States and Dominica in the Caribbean that is applying advanced machine learning and state-of-the-art robotics to listen to and translate the communication of sperm whales. And we were founded in February 2020, right before the pandemic. We have over 40 scientists working on this project from 15 institutions and 9 countries. And the founder of our work, Dr. David Gruber, is a National Geographic explorer and also a professor of environmental science at Baruch College in New York. And in his previous phases of his career, David studied bioluminescence and also really was focused on how can we use marine biology and technology to see from animals' perspectives. So an example of that is he invented a shark eye camera to see the ocean from a shark's perspective. And he also did a lot of work with SETI's head of robotics, Rob Wood of Harvard, to really look at how can we make robotics and the methods of studying marine biology more delicate and gentle. They actually co-invented the most delicate robot in the world, which is a robot that can study a jellyfish with a tenth of the pressure that our eyelid has when it meets our eye. And so we really bring that ethos of gentle robotics and exploration to our work at SETI, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And we chose whales to study for Project SETI because this can be surprising, but they share traits similar to humans. They live in matriarchal and multicultural society, and their vocalizations are coda-based and similar to Morse code, which make them ideal for studying using machine learning to identify language patterns. And although we are a technology organization, and this will be a huge theme of my talk, and I think really showed up in Jorn's, you know, we really lead with the center focus on nature and conservation. And a large part of that for us is our head of biology, Dr. Shane Giro, has been studying the whales that we're studying in Dominica for 20 years. So intimately familiar with these animals, and our work is centered on that. So what does this all have to do with conservation? We really wanted to take an alternative approach with SETI. We feel that much of the world is disconnected from nature, and we wanted to really work on something that could complement all these incredible other contributions, and with a larger goal of shifting perspective of how we relate to nature, how we relate to each other, and how we relate to the other species that we share the earth with. And we hope that the data and findings of SETI can really contribute to increased wonder and connectedness to the whales, to the ocean, and really inspire more action around conservation. We really view SETI as carrying on the legacy of the Save the Whales movement. When Roger Payne, sorry, I just want to go back one. When Roger Payne discovered that whales could sing in the 1960s, it completely changed how people save the whales. It sparked the Save the Whales movement, and it led to policy like the Marine Mammal Protection Act that saved various species of whales from extinction and stopped large-scale whaling. You know, and all this was hearing just the sounds of whales. You know, imagine what could happen, what the possibilities are if we can understand them. I'm sad to share that we actually lost Roger in June. He was a core part of the SETI team. And I share this about his passing because before he passed, he shared a piece of his final thoughts to Time. And I want to share this quote with you all. He says, 50 years ago, people fell in love with the songs of humpback whales and joined together to ignite a global conservation movement. It's time for us once again to listen to the whales, and this time to do it with every bit of empathy and ingenuity we can muster so that we might possibly understand them. So we really have this as a driving force behind our work. So to continue just talking about our connection to conservation, we are very grateful to be able to do our work in the beautiful island of Dominica. If you all haven't been there, I really recommend it. It's known as the Nature Island of the Caribbean. It has some of the most impactful conservation and climate resilience leadership in the region and in the world. You know, we know that small island states are on the front lines of climate change. Dominica was severely affected by Hurricane Maria back in 2017. 90% of buildings on the island were destroyed. And coming out of that, Dominica declared its intention to become the first climate resilient nation in the world. So while we do our research there, our core goal is to support their conservation leadership, marine related conservation goals, and regional leadership around climate. And just to say two other areas we really want to have impact in, first of all, marine biology. You know, SETI is completely unlike any other marine biology related initiative. And we hope that we can really offer a lot to the field, as well as the field of interspecies communication. This is an emerging field. I'm sure many on this call are very aware of how the field has blossomed even since our founding in 2020. And this data set will be one of the largest data sets offered to the interspecies communication space. We're the largest interdisciplinary interspecies communication effort in the world right now. So we're really looking forward to offering, you know, really a values-based project in the interspecies communication space that really uses tech as a tool, not as the end goal. And of course, coming out of that, thinking of conservation policy, you know, hopefully the ways that we're recording data will also lead to new data around noise pollution, which can lead to different policies, not just around conserving and preserving marine mammals, but also just ocean policy overall. So just to get into the tech, we put forward our roadmap in 2022 and can share the link after, and would, you know, love to share it with you all. This really lays out how are we going to use technology to tackle this challenge of understanding whale communication. So we have several ways that we're doing it, and this illustration shows how the SETI ecosystem works. So our first layer of technology is that we have bio-inspired tags that are put on the whale. These are non-invasive tags. When I say bio-inspired, they are actually inspired by suction and adhesion found in the natural world. So for example, clingfish and other animals and marine animals, that cling onto other animals. We wanted to really advance the field of suction. We actually have someone on the team solely dedicated to research in this area. Tagging is something that's used universally across a lot of marine biology projects, and we hope that this technology that we're using, that's much more delicate than anything that ever came before, will push that forward in that direction. We also have stationary buoys, which you can see here with the microphones extending down to the bottom of the ocean. These were custom developed. They were quite complex. These are just on all of the time, listening to both the ambient noise and the whales as they communicate. Oh, one more note on the tags. We actually have a heart sensor on the tags as well. So that really allows us to see, hopefully start to get some data around any relation with pollution and ship noise and others that might cause stress for the whales. So that was a really exciting development as well. The stationary buoys, as I mentioned, have microphones for audio. We also are using drones to have video, to make sure we have that 360 context. And last, we are just implementing now a glider. We would think of it as a type of robotic fish almost that's swimming along. You can see the robotic fish in this illustration, swimming along with the whales, diving with the whales, again, not touching the whales, but able to record and audio as it goes along with the whales. Once we have all the data from this tech, it is fed into our machine learning pipeline, which is trained really to learn language like a baby whale. Here are the buoys in real life. You can see they have solar panels on them. These are in the waters right off of Dominica. They run as very deep, and this was definitely one of the most complex pieces of our technology we needed to develop. Here are our boats that we use for this research. The primary boat is a sailboat. This was very important to us because of climate implications, of course. This third boat that you see here that's blue with the white top is a locally made Dallinga style boat, which we were really excited to add to the fleet. And I'll say a little more on this later, but all of this equipment has already been donated to Dallinga as part of our exit plan of the project. But, I think one of the questions that Sasha asked that we think is one of the most critical is, okay, like, how did we identify that technology should be used in this manner? And we really view machine learning as a way to translate animal communication as the new telescope. This window has just opened to understand data on this new level using advances in machine learning and AI. Obviously, there's so much dialogue about AI and the negative effects it can have. We wanted to offer this project as a way that AI can be used to really show an alternative future. The tech is happening regardless. How can we harness it for good, for conservation, which is obviously what this whole conversation is about. But, with the machine learning, we're able to take this data and find patterns we never would have been able to find before. And we, of course, have so many large language models from studying human language that we can now apply to non-human language. And just to get really out there on you guys, you noticed our name is Project SETI. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware of the other project SETI, which is about extraterrestrial communication. When SETI was first coming to be developed, this was something that was brought up, is this model that we're using, this technology we're using, it can be used to decode any other language, including potentially if there are other species on other planets, which I know is definitely an unexpected path that this could go down. But there's so much talk of space exploration as well, and not a lot of practical applications of what would happen should we encounter other beings. So yeah, I think when it comes to the digital and the conservation sector, I loved Jorn's chart. I really view, obviously machine learning is at the heart of SETI. I think that is such a powerful tool for conservation. The opportunity of how to use this technology to advance conservation is boundless. I think the most important, and I'll talk about this later in this talk, is how are we going to do it in a values-based manner, which it's so amazing to hear about the other two projects on this call, because we know that they have some similar values. So just to jump into the idea to implementation, this is obviously a super unique project. And I think one of the things that I really learned, not having, I have a lot of nonprofit experience and building new initiatives, as Sasha mentioned, working on a complex science project across disciplines, really learned it's hard to identify funding for this. So we had most of our initial funding from the TED Audacious project, which is TED Talks collaborative funding network. And we were very grateful. The project really spoke to them. They put together a cohort of donors to support. Prior to that, this idea started at Radcliffe. David Gruber, our founder, Shafi Goldwasser, who invented the technology that allows us to send money virtually overseas. She's a cryptographer, won a Turing Award, and Michael Bronstein, who's our head of machine learning, who was the head of fake news at Twitter prior to coming to SETI. They were all at Harvard's Radcliffe Fellowship together. One day, David was playing some whale sounds. Shafi came by his office, and the rest is history. They held a conference to really workshop this idea of using machine learning in this way. And then from there, created the proposal, applied for funding in Audacious, and then the nonprofit was founded in 2020. So I would say, donors really resonated with this unique approach. I think the idea of people coming across disciplines, coming across institutions to work on a scientific project of this scale is something that excites people. And for them and for us, we hope that this can be a model of how to work across disciplines and institutions on other complex challenges. So where do we sit on the technology spectrum? Are we experimental or are we cautious? And I think the answer is that we're both. We're obviously highly experimental. All this technology is new. We're taking every discipline from machine learning to marine biology to underwater acoustics to new levels with this. We're being very experimental with how we do it. We're recalibrating as we go. but we are cautious for all the reasons that I mentioned before. We really feel strongly that as these technologies become more and more advanced, it has to be values-based. So the ways that we're cautious with, of course, how we operate in Dallinga, wanting to make sure that local leadership is central to the project. Obviously, this is a huge international initiative. Working in the global south, we want it to be a new model of how that work can happen in a very non-extractive way with an equity lens. And then using the delicate technologies, which I mentioned before. And then a big thing that we're really exploring, which is challenging a lot of the status quo in especially marine biology, is are playbacks experiments necessary? The better this technology gets, the playback gets more and more risky. And we're actually hosting ethics workshops. We haven't done any playback yet. We hosted a moral imagination workshop last June with a bunch of experts in the space. And we have really lofty aims for this work, and we want it to bring so much hope and impact for our environmental future, but we have to make sure our day-to-day approaches are aligned. So before we even explore playback, we are doing all of this groundwork, which is a huge part of how we're being cautious as we move forward. And this really leads me to our core values. We really try to keep these core values in mind with everything we do. So exemplary science, always having the science lead, care and empathy, community and cooperation, and of course, innovation, but also intention around that innovation. And I think when I think about how we would like to see the conservation sector use disruptive technologies, we really recommend establishing your core values. And it was amazing to see that Jorn also has some guiding principles. So I think you're seeing a through line here. And I'm sure, speaking for both of us, we'd love to talk further about this and would love to help guide if people are thinking of putting together core values or guiding principles. I think, again, for us, tech is a tool. It's not the end game. We very deliberately have a whole core of this team that are conservation and animal experts, and that will always be how we are leading this project with that expertise. And just to get into Dominica, this is a huge part of our core values is how we're centering inclusivity and local community engagement. My personal belief, and I've tried to implement this across all of my work I've done throughout my career, is it doesn't matter where you're from or whether you're working in the so-called global north or so-called global south, everyone is best positioned to know what's needed in their own communities. So part of that value set for us really meant from the beginning, Dominica was so central to us. And one of the first things we did was establish a marine conservation fellowship program. This is a 10-month, 9-module training program for young Dominicans interested in marine science, allows them to be part of SETI's research, as well as general leadership development, professional development. And we co-created this with National Geographic, who's our principal communications partner. And I see that one of our amazing fellows is on the call, Tracy. So glad you're here, Tracy. We just finished our first cohort of fellowship, started our second. So that's been a huge part of our work, and really making sure that the next generation of leaders in Dominica and the Caribbean is core to our project. And you can see the fellows here participating in a photo camp with National Geographic, getting diving certification, as well as being on the boat and witnessing the research. We've also prioritized research and government collaborations. Zethra Barron in the tan dress here is our fisheries liaison. So we coordinate a lot with the government, as well as civil society organizations with the forestry division. All of our findings are open source with a priority on making them available for Dominican researchers and researchers in the region. And we do other things around our research, like for example, last December, we did a survey of the ocean that would allow more data to allow Dominica to push forward a new plan for an additional MPA that they want to put in place. So that's another example of how we engage. And I mentioned before, but all of SETI's boats, we have a lab, all our tools, everything has already been donated to our local entity. So at the conclusion of the project, whenever that is, we will be making all of that available for use in Dominica from a sustainability perspective. And I know we're running low on time, but last, just wanted to mention, because we're a language and listening project, our linguist team is actually working with the Kalinago people, who are the indigenous people in Dominica, on language preservation at their request. So just another way that we're engaging with the community. I will be really quick talking about challenges and barriers. Anytime you're building new tech, obviously, lots of barriers. When we first installed our buoys, but there were a bunch of unforeseen challenges. So we tested everything, took them out, and 9 months later, we've just put them back in and are retesting. I think that's been the biggest thing, is when you're trying to do things differently, when you're trying to build these new technologies, the timelines are long and the process is challenging. Also, of course, logistics. Just, standard. I'm sure everyone on this call has faced that in the last few years because of the pandemic. We've really overcome the challenge too of working across so many institutions by setting up the organization as a nonprofit. It offers a mission and vision to unite the team. We're able to, really put our priorities in service of our larger vision. And we built a structure and communications pathways to really make sure everyone can communicate well. Another part of our approach has been to be really quiet. We've not been talking a lot about our work. Now we have 5 peer-reviewed papers in the pipeline that are in the process of peer review at various journals. We have some initial findings. We have a paper coming out hopefully soon. We'll see how long the process takes, that introduces the idea of a whale phonetic alphabet. And we just had a feature in the New Yorker. If you are interested in learning more about the project, definitely recommend checking it out. Elizabeth Colbert wrote it, and we were so grateful to have her be the first journalist to do an in-depth feature on SETI's work because of her climate and conservation expertise, which brings me to my final, which is that when she was in Dominica with us for 5 days, our team actually witnessed a whale birth. And as I mentioned before, our head of biology studied these whales for over 20 years. He'd never seen a birth. And I wanted to have this as my last slide because obviously, to say things are challenging right now in the world is an understatement. And our vision for this initiative is just to offer a new model, a new way of working, a new way that people can come together to solve a challenge, and really put that all towards service of us being more connected and appreciative of our natural world. And this was a great, beautiful gift that really reminded us of the why behind Project SETI. And there's so many ways technology can have an impact for conservation. This is just our offering. And yeah, we just keep the whales and the ocean as our core vision and mission. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fiona. What a beautiful photo to end on. I absolutely adore that. And I also wasn't expecting the sessions to talk about the potential of translating extraterrestrials. So that was a lovely surprise for me as well. So if you have any questions for Fiona, please put them in the chat and we'll get around to as many as possible in the Q&A. So our final speaker today, definitely last but not least, is Jeremy. Jeremy Epstein is a member of the executive team at Open Forest Protocol. He's dedicated his entire educational and professional career to addressing climate change, a passion that came at a very early age. And in his own words, he is obsessed with unlocking capital deployment into climate solutions. His work has always focused at the intersection of finance and climate, and he is based in Boulder, Colorado. I believe it's just after 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. now on your wife's birthday today, Jeremy. So please apologize to her from us for dragging you away. And over to you now.
All right, thank you so much. Well, she's out on a hike with her friends, so she's well taken care of, having a nice day. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you all for staying with us, and I'll try to make sure that I err on the side of brevity so that we have plenty of time for Q&A. Do love answering questions and getting into the specifics of whatever anybody wants to know more about. Just to sort of cap off, who am I? Head of growth at Open Forest Protocol. I've been working on climate solutions my entire career. And yeah, the thread has always been, how do we flow more capital into climate solutions? I would say I'm a and person, meaning that I would say despite tribalism that I sometimes see in promoting one solution over another, it's decarbonization or carbon removal, restoration or conservation, climate or biodiversity, I've come to realize it's really all interconnected. And it all needs our direct attention if it's to become far bigger, far more well-funded than it currently is. We know that philanthropy has trouble scaling. Sure, philanthropic funding can have impressive numbers, but we really need to increase that by many factors in order to really take a hard look and make an impact on the climate challenges and the biospheric challenges that we're currently facing. And I believe that there's far more money out there that wants a return on investment than that which does not. Open Forest Protocol is sort of an open system that does sort of accommodate all sorts of capital, and we can get into how that works. Apologies, I'm just looking for the next slide button here. There we are. So Open Forest Protocol exists to facilitate and accelerate the adoption of market-based solutions through digital infrastructure. We're designed to break down barriers that have previously limited the implementation of drawdown solutions that protect our biosphere. Again, I would say the main barriers are sort of a two-way street. One being a lack of trust and transparency in the implementation of funding. People don't necessarily know or trust where their money is going and that it's having provable impact. And I would say going the other way, difficulty connecting capital with large and small scale, or what I'd call sort of the long tail of projects, with that capital efficiently. So getting that capital to the implementers on the ground without intermediaries or other friction points. That's really a core focus of what Open Forest Protocol does. So really, this is kind of what we're looking to fix. We have the voluntary carbon market today, and I will sometimes refer to it as the environmental crediting market, because I think we're at an inflection point where we're going beyond carbon, and I think that's a good thing. We have, you know, an emerging, I would say, quickly growing biodiversity crediting market. I've seen water credits. There's sort of a more of a broad-based movement here, but I think the barriers that we're trying to fix still remain in the implementation of any of these market-based solutions, which essentially take an impact, measure it, create some sort of a financial instrument, aka a credit, and then essentially monetize that, right? So what are those barriers? One, the system today, the way that these credits get generated is exclusive, it's expensive, and it's slow. Mostly because this process has not seen much digitization or innovation over the last 20 to 30 years. We are still generating credits through emails, PDFs, and spreadsheets, and that's not scaling. We've had 20 to 30 years now with these markets to achieve scale, and we know that you know, forest coverage continues to go down, biodiversity loss continues to increase. So I would say on a large scale, this is not a successful implementation in its current iteration. We at Open Forest Protocol believe the future of environmental crediting markets, the voluntary carbon market, are digital, and that we are creating the sort of base level infrastructure to digitize this market. With OFP, the benefits that we get are, I would say, across a number of different scales. Right now, for the conservation community to begin making the switch to digital technologies, the technology is there and it's getting better every single day. There's an influx of new startups breaking down barriers in the climate tech space that cannot be ignored. And I will say on a macro level, it seems clearly evident to me that we need to change the way we do things because we're losing the global fight to conserve these spaces. So again, the benefits we get with Open Forest Protocol include we remove upfront verification costs. We verify data with a network of experts. And that is an increasingly large network, almost 30 individual expert organizations that bring their own technology to bear in the process of reviewing public data that is essentially available to them through a blockchain-based interface, and verifying whether that data is comprehensive and indeed reflects what's happening on the ground, or should be should be denied because it fails to meet either one of those tests. And our system essentially coordinates a consensus among these various actors. So for instance, you have a data set of ground truth data from a forest project, call it in Mozambique. It goes public, put on our blockchain, and you have dozens of independent analyses happening that are bringing satellite technology, artificial intelligence, LiDAR, climate data, dozens of unique perspectives to bear in the evaluation of this information. And any one of these individual actors may have access to information or a unique perspective that allows them to see, hey, look, there's something funny going on with this information. So everyone's voting blindly, but ultimately everyone gets to sort of see, almost like a game of poker, everyone turns their hand over and gets to see what the others are saying. And there is an opportunity for those with, I would say, alternative viewpoints to be able to back those up with data that they might have that others don't have access to. And ultimately, our system helps those parties come to a consensus on the validity of the data. Contrast that with a single verification body hired by the project developer to essentially write a report verifying that the data is good. I think our system wins in that regard. We can accommodate small projects, or what I'd call the long tail. I believe this is how you scale, whether this is conservation, forestation, mangrove restoration. We enable projects of all sizes that previously were excluded from carbon accreditation and generating what I would call carbon financing or results-based financing for the impact that they are having not only locally, but on the global commons, aka the atmosphere. Credit transparency. We believe this is kind of the true unlock, is that we know that the Red Plus program particularly has seen some very significant negative press in the last year. Why is that? If you really boil it down, I would say a lack of transparency in the process of measurement, reporting, and verification of what's happening on the ground is the key reason that these projects have seen failure. So with the Open Forest Protocol, all data, as soon as it is collected, is pushed to a public blockchain and becomes what I'd say tattooed on the public record. It's immutable. It is cannot be destroyed, cannot be altered, and it is accessible to anyone or everyone that wishes to access it. And that, what I have learned, is perhaps the greatest disincentive for bad actors. We are a terrible platform for those who wish to game the system. So what's our growth trajectory? What are we looking to achieve at Open Forest Protocol? If you really boil it down, our key roles are that we have built a digital platform that collects and stores data, verifies that data with a unique consensus-based process, which I described. We issue assets or credits based on verified data, and then we support the efficient offload of those credits into the market, whether that's through marketplaces, through brokers, through direct sale to off-takers, whether that's digital Legos to point of sale systems, so that every time someone's making a purchase on, say, Amazon, a bit of a chunk of a credit gets retired. All those things are possible when you have a fully digitized system. Our go-to-market is with an afforestation, reforestation methodology. So essentially, we've built this digital infrastructure, and then we built one vertical on top of it, just to say, here's how this will work. This is our proof of concept. Our methodology and carbon white paper went live last week. That can be made available if anybody's interested. It's available. You can find it on our LinkedIn, also through our website. So that's getting very good reviews out there among the carbon ratings agencies. And we intend to be able to open this system up, not only to Open Forest Protocol team addition of new verticals. We are currently developing a mangrove restoration vertical, as well as a biodiversity and conservation mixed vertical, which I can describe in, I would say, high level detail here. but ultimately open our system up to any third parties wishing to access a more efficient digital system for these core functions, to collect data, make that public, verify the data, and issue the assets. This is just a quick view of, oh, look at that, clicked right over, of our Open Forest Explorer. Love when technology works better than expected. I won't spend too much time here, but you can really drill down to the level of the individual project. If that project has gotten to a data upload, you can actually see that data upload available, all that information. So, for instance, if one of these projects has a sample plot number 4 with tree number 7, you can see that tree. And over time, because that project will be uploading data on a regular basis, you're going to see that tree. So 10 years from now, you'll see that tree growing over that 10-year period. So if you're investing in a credit coming out of that project, you can actually view the trees from the sample plots within that project over time. And that data collection coming from the ground, that engages local communities. And we know that is the largest reason that that projects fail, is from a lack of local engagement. Local engagement is integral and built into our process. It doesn't work without local engagement. The nice thing is we can add and layer in all of the beautiful digital technologies with remote sensing on top of that as we go. I'm going to try to click forward. I'm not sure how to get out of this screen. I don't know if, Sasha, you can support me here.
I'm not sure I can. It's Rosie that's currently sharing screen. So where would it be? If you go back to your Zoom screen, because I think you've just basically gone to your internet. Yeah, so if you minimize that screen, Jeremy, that you're on.
Is this sharing off of my computer?
No. Rosie.
I think this is Rosie's computer. I think she just maybe needs to switch back to the tab with the slides.
I haven't touched anything. But
Rosie, if you could maybe stop share and then reshare. You're seeing all the emails now. This is great. You guys are getting a real behind the scenes. Sorry about this, Jeremy. As you said, technology can be more efficient than you want sometimes.
It was working great, so I knew I had to pay for it later.
We've already got some great questions coming in the chat, so I'm very excited to get to those. But hopefully, yes, this might be it. Rosie, I'm not sure. Are you still on the... Can you go into presenter mode or...
oh,
Sorry, everyone, for the slight technical glitch here. Whilst Rosie's sorting that out, please think.
While she's sorting that, let me tell a quick story. I think the origin story and the founder story of Open Forest Protocol is quite interesting, and it gives you a flavor of kind of how we came about. Our organization has been doing R&D for about 3 years. We were founded in late 2020. With the co-founding team being sort of a mix of folks working in the forestation industry, folks working in the Web3 and crypto industry. And it's, at that point, I would say a very unlikely and serendipitous meeting of people from completely different corners of the professional world. Our CEO had co-founded an NGO in Switzerland that was doing reforestation projects internationally and selling the tree planting attributes to corporates. But he was really unhappy with the data that he was able to get from his projects, not being able to track them, on a regular basis? Were the trees still there? Were those trees growing? How were they growing? Because he knew that better data could allow him to sell ultimately credits at a higher price, because there's more trust, there's more transparency. He had sort of an inkling that blockchain might be a good solution to overcome this barrier, but was not a technical blockchain person. At the same time, our technical co-founder and chief products officer, Michael Kelly, had been working in the crypto industry for about 5 years at that point, and had been approached by a sustainability professor, friend of his, and was working on a white paper with the director of the Center for International Forestry Research on how does blockchain address a very specific use case from a very specific scenario, which was Norwegian Sovereign Fund wanted to give several $100 million to a tree planting project that would occur in Pakistan, but they needed better assurances on how the capital would be used, that the trees would be going in the ground, and how to track the growth and carbon drawdown of those trees over time. So they had been shipping around this paper for a period of time, and it just so happened that both of these founders had a mutual friend that made the introduction, said, hey, you guys should chat and discuss. So that's how Open Forest Protocol started. And I don't think we would be where we are today without that really serendipitous meeting of people working in, I would say, pretty disparate industries, but realizing that they're sort of looking at the same problem from different angles. And that sort of diverse skill set continues today on our team. I would say rare to bring together people with such expertise in blockchain, as well as sort of the nature-based solutions world.
Hi, Jeremy.
All right, were you able to go to the next slide?
Yeah, I'm just going to chip in here and say that we are now only 15 minutes worth of Q&A left. I'm aware that you haven't had a chance to get through your slides. If you still have control of the slide deck, feel free to maybe wrap up in 1 or 2 minutes.
You got it.
If you can, and then we'll hop to Q&A. Okay.
I'm unable to go to the next slide, so I'm just going to skip to the last one because I definitely want to make time for Q&A. If someone else is able to get control and go to slide 11, that'd be great, but otherwise, no worries. So I believe the future of environmental crediting markets and VCM is digital. Otherwise, scale doesn't occur. We've built an open system underpinned by the Internet of Value and Ownership, aka Web3, that can easily accommodate third parties supplying data intelligence to our data verification system, that can efficiently flow capital down to the individual actors that are having the impact on the ground without intermediaries, and make nature a truly investable asset class that is fully data backed. I think sort of the goal here is really to out coordinate the competition, and we don't really see any competition. We see this as the digital version of, say, a Vera or a Gold Standard, and we would invite any third parties interested in developing their own asset class on our digital infrastructure to get in touch and perhaps collaborate with us and make use of this to help accelerate and scale.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm so sorry about the technical issues there and that we had to cut you short. Hopefully you'll get to cover some of your content in the Q&A now as well. So yeah, that was my first time hearing these presentations as well, and absolutely fascinating stuff. Thank you, guys. And thank you for the questions that have been coming in. We will have to just hit the ground running with these questions due to the kind of slight compression of time now. So the first one that I wanted to address was one that I believe Jorn has already commented on in the chat, but Jorn, I would love for you to say a bit more about it, and also our other speakers, Jeremy and Fiona, to chip in as well. And it was a question from Queen saying, was it an easy or hard sell for this program to these countries? So was it an easy or hard sell to get your initiative into the more local countries? What were the obstacles and how did you overcome them? And how were those collaborations going? So Jorn, I know, yes. Yeah, please go ahead with what you said.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I gave a short answer to that one, and I can elaborate a bit further. I think it was a relatively easy sell, and I think that's due to the nature that technology is always sort of exciting and novel, and to a certain extent sexy to think about even for national authorities, right? So they're very keen to jump on board and they're very excited to think of, okay, cool, this is new technology, and it could have a clear fit for them to use. So it was not a hard sell. The harder sell was for them to use it in an appropriate manner, right? And that's where you hit the ethical aspects of it, the accountability and responsibility when, for example, communities or other stakeholders are engaged through these authorities when confronted with deforestation, right? So that sort of whole chain is the harder sell to make. That's where it takes a lot of back and forth, a lot of collaboration with partners on the ground, also other civil society organizations and NGOs that play a role in that space. And that's a long, I mean, that's just a long, that's a long haul, right? That's why some of the key success factors for us on that approach was to have a foothold on the ground to ensure that could, that chain could play out, right? Having WWF play a role, and not only WWF, I mean, other NGOs that have a bigger role to play in some of these landscapes than WWF had a better fit than us to take that part. That's my short answer to a very important question. Yeah.
Thank you, Jorn. Jeremy or Fiona, would you like to chip in on this one?
I'm happy to jump in. Fiona, do you want to? Okay, I'll just go quick. Then Fiona, feel free. We are working with a number of different countries: Kenya, Ivory Coast, DRC. Those are earlier discussions, but there's been very little barrier. Oftentimes we get through an entire pitch without mentioning sort of the Web3, and I think that's sort of important to note, is that as Web3 develops and as it gets better, it will integrate in more experiences that you have without you knowing. And I think that's like the interesting paradox. As these technologies continue to infiltrate everything that we do, it'll be less and less obvious that you're using and having a Web3 experience as you go. For countries, right now, if you follow Kyoto Protocol, they're often looking at Article 6, their nationally determined contributions on essentially, what carbon credits can they generate within their national boundaries, and what happens if they sell those external to their national boundaries, or do they retire them internally? This is this is essentially an accounting problem. And this is a perfect use case for a distributed ledger technology. Open Forest Protocol can provide at really no cost to the countries a system to track exactly what's happening, and where do those credits end up, and where are they retired. So yeah, I think I'd say the conversations have been positive so far, and hope that continues.
Thank you, Jeremy. Fiona, I've got a slightly separate question for you, if you're happy for me to shift slightly towards the more empathy aspect. Would that be okay? So
sure, and maybe as part of that, I could just comment quickly on this.
Well, yeah, no, please do.
As well.
Please comment on that. And then the follow-up was also about, you're looking at exploring the potential of technology to bridge the gap between species, and we've also had a question here about overcoming the nature disconnect and unlocking engagement and funding due to that. Do you think that advancements in the technologies can further enhance our understanding and connection with the non-human world and help close these gaps?
Yeah, well, just quickly on the former question, couldn't agree more with Jorn or Jeremy, but I think the added piece is, I think this is where interdisciplinary learnings are so critical, right? As we're embarking on these technology-based projects, taking learnings from, most of my experiences in the international development space, which has had its own problematic and challenging legacy of how to work across the world. And I think taking cues from the justice spaces, both obviously so many intersectional issues here, but particularly from climate justice, of how to build coalitions, a lot of the things that Jorn is talking about I loved what he said about it's a commitment, right? It has to happen before the project, during the project, throughout the project, after the project, right? This is a lifelong commitment of making sure, whether you're in New York or whether you're in DRC or whether you're in Chile, that it is a equal stakeholder situation. With a lot of, I really appreciate what Jeremy said about how they could do a whole pitch without the tech. this is about people still. And I think that's what we have to remember, but that's technology still, especially at this phase. It is about people, it's about relationships, it's about strong communications. And I think that does add to the empathy question. And the short answer is, I hope so, right? That's our hope. That is why we're doing SETI. We want to think that this is a completely out of the box way to use these technologies to help bridge these gaps. I think another thing I think about a lot that we haven't spoken about a lot publicly is climate anxiety, right? We are in a very significant time. We know that nature and understanding nature in all of its forms can ease that and cause extreme mental health benefits as well. So as we take this journey, I think, you know, that is our hypothesis. We think it can, we hope so, and please follow us on this journey, because it's not going to happen overnight, but I do think that if we can reach a level of deeper understanding of the wonder of the world around us, of what other species are feeling and thinking, my hope is that it's not a kumbaya moment by any means, but that it'll further our commitment towards stewardship in all its forms.
Love that. Thank you, Fiona. And just building on that question that came through about the empathy and citizen engagement, and this is for Jorn and Jeremy. If and how do you think that Web3 technology could unlock citizen engagement within the conservation space? So beyond that nature disconnect as well, but also that engagement and funding. And do you think that it can pull in citizen donators with Web3 technologies? And do you know of any initiatives that are currently trying to answer those questions? Jeremy, I can see you've unmuted. Did you want to have a go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's kind of two angles to discuss. A quick response here is, one, a lot of the users of Open Forest Protocol, those that have projects underway, are small landholders, oftentimes women, who, you know, they've been excluded from the financial system. This is very empowering to be able to enable these people wherever they are to, you know, essentially support nature and receive a direct annual payment, simply by, you know, keeping that nature in the ground and providing the data and evidence that's required. So that's been sort of game changing from that aspect. From the, I would say, you know, call it retail investment, or sort of the citizen investment, Open Forest Protocol is, well, will soon be essentially an investable asset class. And the short version of this is, we will have a public token sale, a token being essentially a digital share in the protocol. And what does that digital share get you? That gets you essentially a access to yielding a small percentage of all the credits that get generated through our system. So our projects are creating credits every single year. We're adding more projects every single week. And ultimately, we'll have dozens of third parties generating credits through our platform as well. So an annually increasing APY, or that's the idea at least, as well as a token with its own sort of increasing perceived value as well. So that's open and accessible, you know, to anyone, as simple as buying, you know, a share of Ethereum or you know, whatever digital currency you can think of.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jorn, did you want to touch on this at all?
Just a quick remark. I think the bigger, I had a short answer to that already. I think Robert asked that question. I gave an example that I know of, but honestly, I don't think they've seen many examples in this field yet. I think they're going to emerge, specifically with the younger generation that is heavily involved in the digital realm, and gamification. I mean, blockchain. These types of things are very emerging. So I'm sure we'll see more examples coming up. I just haven't seen a lot of them landing yet. And I know some of these also very tricky from a conservation organization to deploy due to some of the controversial aspects to some of these technologies, either energy consumption or simply because blockchain is difficult to understand for some, specifically to donors that are typically involved with the likes of WWF, right? So there are some bottlenecks or some hoops we'll have to jump through over time, but I'm sure they will pop up. But I haven't seen many as of yet.
Thank you, Jorn. So we've got 2 minutes left, which is, the session's gone so quickly. As a very last piece, I just want to ask, how do you see the role of digital technologies evolving within the conservation sector in the coming years? And what new opportunities or challenges do you anticipate? So I'd love just to go around each of you and just in a couple of words, if you could summarize, how do you see the role evolving and the new opportunities and challenges that you might experience? Does anyone want to go first? Putting you on the spot.
I can go. I just think, again, I want to call everyone back to Jorn's chart because I think it was really important. And I think machine learning coming to the forefront here is really interesting. And I think we're going to see, SETI was, as I mentioned, founded in 2020. It's only 3 years later. I mean, the advances, as we all know on this call, because everyone here is involved, have been astronomical. And you've already seen this entire space of interspecies communication just blossom overnight. I think we're going to see a lot more emerging spaces like this. So I just want to put a plea in again for the values-based approaches. I think that the more and more advanced that these technologies get, it's going to pull us further from some of the themes we're talking about here with guiding principles and people and relationships and how do we preserve that. I think that's the opportunity and the challenge. And also to really think outside of the realm of our specific niches of what we're working on and how can we join with others? How can we join? Think of ways to apply these technologies that can help us build the future we want, not the future that is feeling scary. And how do we tell those stories and involve the world?
Thank you so much, Fiona. We are actually now at time, so I will stop there. But I do encourage everyone to connect with our amazing speakers on LinkedIn and ask more questions to them directly if you so wish. So thank you all for your presence and engagement today. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you here and have the really vibrant conversation that's been going on. I can see the chat has been pinging away, which has been brilliant. If today did tick some of your boxes, please sign up to our second session, which is in a week's time, which is on a similar theme of practical strategies for conservationists in an increasingly digital world. The link for that will hopefully be in the chat. Yep, I see it there. And we will be talking about how to operationalize a digital strategy within organizations, Web3 and inclusivity, and culture and mindset needed for innovation, among some other topics. So I really hope to see you there. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everyone there. Thank you to the backstage team. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.